Good evening. Welcome, everybody. And can I say on behalf of all my colleagues at the Centre for Independent Studies, Merry Christmas to all of you. I think you can still say that these days, can't you? Yeah, we are a very serious public policy think tank, but we like to joke about a few things, particularly at a time when there are certain subjects that can't be discussed openly without inciting mass hysteria and shock and hysteria, but we won't go there yet. My colleague Steven Schwartz, who'll be speaking very soon, will make a few jokes. I'm going to be more serious for the moment and talk about something more seriously, and that is, as the year 2022 draws to a close, I think it's fair to say that most people will be glad to see the back of it. The post-Cold War era has resolutely ended with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and, of course, China shaking its fist at Taiwan. Much of the Western world has been additionally destabilised by a real serious bout of inflation made worse by higher energy prices. I think it's fair to say that America, our great and powerful friend, remains seriously polarised and deeply divided. So too, by the way, does the European Union, with individual polities from Italy and Hungary railing against the Brussels orthodoxy. And of course, in the Anglosphere, the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II signalled the closure of an epoch and promoted deep introspection. And this was not helped by the fact that in Britain itself, the country had 3 prime ministers in 6 weeks, which of course gives Australia a real run for its money, which has had 7 prime ministers in the last 12 years. I love the fact that someone like Nick Bryant, an old mate of mine, long-time BBC correspondent in Sydney, he's written many books and given many speeches at the Opera House, saying that the rest of the world constantly scrutinises Australia and reacts to events here and condemns us for being outside the realms of polite society. Now the tables have turned. Meanwhile, many economies, and this has been a big issue for us at CIS during the COVID era, many economies now seem to think that the old joke about money growing on trees is actually true. And they're encouraged to do so by a growing belief that it's the state's place to sort out every problem a society faces. And Steven Schwartz will talk about that in a moment. And at the same time, this notion that a people are helpless without the state is indicative of a collapse of self-confidence that increasingly calls into question the fundamentals of Western society. At the same time, we're told by our leaders we must move to net zero emissions by 2050, even though those same leaders have no qualms whatsoever in exporting our vast reserves of gas and coal, which of course just props up the economy with huge amounts of revenue. So it seems to me that in the circumstances, you could do with some cheering up, and who better to make us laugh than my friend and our colleague, Professor Steven Schwartz, who's been a senior fellow at CIS for more than 30 years. Steven has also been a vice-chancellor at 3 universities in Australia, Macquarie and in Perth and in London. And he will set out this year's Nanny State Awards. Take it away, Steven.
My name's Steven Schwartz, and I have the singular honour of announcing the winner of this year's highly coveted Nanny State Award. The Centre for Independent Studies created the Nannies, as we like to call them, to highlight the year's most ridiculous attempts by other people to mind your own business. Each year, an army of food fascists, sanctimonious simpletons, and bureaucratic busybodies slave away just to ensure that there are always many worthy contenders for the nannies. In my role as the CIS's resident nannyologist, I survey the world and identify the latest developments in nanny statism. California is the undisputed leader in the field, but this year the United Kingdom is a very strong challenger. The UK has augmented traditional nanny state obsessions, what we drink, what we eat, what we smoke, with something new. I call it the triple W, weird woke worries. Let me give you an example. With the help of an eco-philosopher and a Buddhist convert, England's University of East Anglia is offering students counseling to help them overcome the grief caused by climate change. You might think the Brits would enjoy some warm weather, but according to the university, the warming climate has made students sad, afraid, anxious, angry, and powerless. Farcical, right? But remember what Karl Marx said about farce. It's closely related to tragedy. How close? Well, let me tell you about Les Sinclair. A 66-year-old citizen of Stirling in Scotland, Les has donated blood for almost 50 years. 125 pints of blood so far. Les considers donating blood his civic duty, especially now when the National Health Service is critically short of blood. Last month, Les noticed a change in the collection procedure. Before donating, he was asked to complete a questionnaire. And one of the questions was, are you expecting a child or have you been pregnant in the past 6 months? Les assumed that this question didn't apply to him. I'm a 66-year-old man, he explained. It's not possible for me to fall pregnant. Nevertheless, the staff insisted he reply to the question. When Les declined, the collection center refused to accept his blood. That's the farcical bit of the story. Now for the tragic part. Les went home and says he will never return. After 50 years and 125 pints of blood, his life-giving gift will no longer assist patients in need. If other donors feel like Les, patients may find there's no blood to save their lives, and that really would be tragic. Confronted by the media, Professor Mark Turner, director of the Scottish Blood Service, agreed a 66-year-old man is unlikely to be pregnant. Still, he insisted that Les must respond to the question. His reason? Sex assigned at birth is not always visually clear to staff, he said. Besides, the professor added, asking men as well as women whether they are pregnant promotes inclusiveness. It seems inclusiveness is more important than saving lives. Like COVID, the Triple W epidemic is highly contagious. As I speak, King Charles's art collection is being woke tested to ensure that no one anywhere will ever be challenged by any royal work of art. While Triple Ws are taking over the UK, you will be pleased to know that traditional nanny state concerns have not been neglected. Neil Oliver, the long-haired star of The Coast TV series, caused a ruckus when he complained about government advertising during last summer's UK heatwave. Oliver was scathing about an ad informing the public that hot weather may make them thirsty. If so, the science-backed response to such a calamity is drink a glass of water. Oliver considered this ad insulting to the intelligence of people and a waste of taxpayers' money. In return, the health authorities accused him of endangering the lives of thirsty people. Don't you just love the nannies? No matter how hard you tried, you could not make this stuff up. Can Australia match the UK's level of nannyism? We're about to find out as I announce this year's nominees and winners. First, it's my pleasure to inform you that the judges have given a Lifetime Achievement Award to the Australian Medical Association and its cronies. They have called for a tax on sugary drinks every year since the Nannies were first awarded, and this year is not an exception. The AMA has pointed to the UK, which began taxing sugary drinks years ago. Apparently, the UK is a model Australia should follow. There's a problem, however. The health benefits of the UK sugar tax aren't immediately obvious. Life expectancy in Australia is the third highest of any country in the world. The UK doesn't even make the top 10. And the unintended consequences of a sugar tax are difficult to predict. 2 years after the implementation of a sugar tax, a recent American study found that sales of sugary drinks decreased a little, but beer sales increased markedly. Not an obvious way to improve public health. Because of their persistent devotion to micromanaging our lives, the AMA is a worthy recipient of this Lifetime Achievement Award. Now, let's turn to this year's finalists. In third place is the Queensland government, which has vowed to phase out coal-fired power by 2035. Now, don't scoff. They have a plan. Generators will be converted to clean energy hubs, and electricity will come from pumped hydro storage. The idea is to produce power by allowing water to flow from an elevated reservoir or dam to a lower level reservoir while passing through a power-producing turbine. The water is then pumped right back up to the top-level reservoir, and the process is repeated. To achieve this vision, the Queensland government must create multiple pairs of large reservoirs. New turbines and transmission cables will also be required. I ask you, given the Queensland government's record of managing reservoirs, what could possibly go wrong? In second place this year are the traffic experts who are calling for an urban speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour to save young people's lives. Slow cars are less lethal, but they harm the economy by making shipping and travel inefficient. When setting speed limits, we must trade off economic costs against the safety benefits of driving slower, and we find some acceptable level of risk. But Amy Peden, a researcher from the University of New South Wales, says that road deaths are all very preventable and there isn't an acceptable level of risk. By refusing to accept any risks at all, the call to lower the speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour is the first runner-up for the 2022 Nanny Award. And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, the winner of this year's Nanny. And it goes to all of those who wish to rename our towns, regions, parks, and landmarks. Among those honored by this award is the organization known as PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. PETA wants Wool Street, W-O-O-L Street in Melbourne, to change its name because, well, just because. PETA, by the way, is a repeat winner. It previously won a Nanny for wanting to change the name of Tasmania's Eggs and Bacon Bay to something vegan. Sharing the honor of this year's Nanny with PETA is Beck Cody, an Australian Capital Territory politician. Some of her constituents are unhappy because a new ACT electorate was named in honor of World War I correspondent Charles Bean. Bean, they say, said anti-Semitic things about World War I General John Monash. In response, Ms. Cody has called for a government review of all Canberra's 7,000 place names. Her goal is to rename all parts of Canberra that, and I quote, are named after bad people. Beck went on to say that during her 30-plus years as a hairdresser, people often raised with her the hurt inflicted by place names. Imagine that. A hairdressing salon in which clients regularly discuss the comments of World War I correspondents. Who would have thought? Not wishing to be left out, Queensland also wants to change place names. Their idea is to call places by the names used by local Indigenous people. There's a cost involved in redoing records and signs and ensuring that locations are clear to the emergency operators. But the biggest cost of renaming is to our national character. Impudent place names, such as the once famous Curly Dick Road and Titswabble Road, are part of the verve and style of Australian life. Is someone really offended by them? I'm sorry to say this, but we live in a world in which rational thought is seeping away. Unburdened by education, tradition, or even common sense, many politicians, activists, and academics consider their ludicrous ideas some sort of divine revelation. What can we do? Our best response to the grievance makers, nanny staters, and just plain fakers is a large, loud horse laugh. It will annoy them, and it will make you feel a lot better. So have a happy Christmas and stay optimistic. We're certain to have more to laugh about when the nannies return in 2023. Thank you.
I think Stephen said it right there. No matter how hard you try, it's hard to make this stuff up. That was Steven Schwartz, who's been a senior fellow here for about 3 decades, and he's written a lot for us in our research program on education, on higher education policy. And as you can tell, he has a great sense of humour. And I think it's a reminder too, the humour is always a great antidote to policy doldrums. You know, these are dark times. You've got to laugh. My favourite example of this absurdity of the new illiberal mindset was actually earlier this year when some distinguished British historians wrote a paper in a peer-reviewed publication, and their claim was that cricket, the sport, had been the most exploitative feature of the British Empire. And which is just absurd when you think about it, because one of the most valuable businesses in modern India is IPL cricket franchise, and that's worth more than $5.5 billion to the mostly Indian people who own it. So it's hardly exploitation. But this is the time we live in, and it's great to hear Steven make those remarks. For decades, CIS has been a fiercely independent voice working hard to promote sound liberal principles. To be notified of our future videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel, then click the notification bell. We rely solely on the generosity of people like you for donations to advance our classical liberal cause. Check out the links on screen now to see how you can get involved.